Hey everybody, so I'm going to get started here in a second. I'm going to wait a little bit for people to join in. So, hi Alexandra. Karen, hi. Okay, so hi Christina. Today's Ask Me Anything is a question about, let me read it. What is the difference between strength training and Pilates on apparatus? Right? Hi, Sonia. And there's another question to that, which is, do we need strength training as we age, and are there aspects of strength training that Pilates on apparatus simply cannot provide us? So, a couple things here. There's springs. And if there's springs, there's resistance. And if there's resistance, that's strength training. So Pilates is strength training. It's just not maximum strength training. Let's put it that way. And when you look at lifting weights, right? So I think that's what a lot of people are discussing. Or there's the weight machines where you put the plates on and it gets more and more and heavier. And in traditional exercise and in traditional training, to get stronger, you need to increase the resistance. That's the foundation, part of the foundation of that, which is partly true, but it's not 100% true, because we know in Pilates, sometimes less resistance is harder and more work, but it's in a different way, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But as far as is there a difference? They're both strength training, and even if you do mat work, it's strength training, because you're working your body weight parts against gravity, and when you're doing that, the muscles have to do what? They are going to strengthen. I mean, that's the perfect example is when you look at astronauts who go up into space and there's no gravity. They lose muscle mass and other things, so they have to do certain types of things to help them facilitate that, because working against gravity builds strength. That's why people who are bedridden end up with a lot of weakness and a lot of problems, because if you're not standing and moving and working in relationship to gravity, a lot of your system must, you have to remember your muscles are an organ, right? It's an organ system. We have lots of different organ systems, right? We have the lungs, we have the gut organs, we have, so the circulatory system. So that, it's one of the systems of the body. And it's designed to help us either stabilize or move, right? That's what it does in relationship to gravity. So when we look at the apparatus is in some ways easier than the mat, because you have help. The spring has got resistance, but it also helps you both ways, or you have to work it both ways, right? You work it on the way out, you work it on the way back in, and you use that in coordination with breathing and other aspects of function, right, and the other body systems. So they're always working together. So that's something that is, so to answer that question, so again, what's the difference between strength training and Pilates on apparatus? Well, if you're using an apparatus that has weights and plates, that's resistance training on an apparatus, and we have Pilates that has springs that give us resistance training on apparatus. So they're the same in that foundational aspect, but how it works is much different, because Joe called his apparatus the universal reformer, and it's one apparatus that you can do how many exercises on? Well, in today's world, who knows, because everybody's making stuff up to do who knows what, to look, to get their likes and stuff on social media. But, as far as Joe goes and his functional relationships to movement and how we learned how to move, and that's integrated into his system, there's so many ways that we work, and he set it up a certain way to do that resistance, because it's what most people don't understand is how the system works in relationship to the spring settings that he set up for that apparatus for that exercise. That's what most people don't get. And I don't have, that's not something I can really teach you in a short little period of time. That happens in the teacher training and other things. But that's the reality, because the apparatus was set up for. Ramon always used to say it was for the average adult person. And so the average, when you look at it, and I always use a bell curve when I teach, and so what's the average? The one at the very top, when you look at the anatomy posters that you see today, right? Everything is in the anatomical position. So they're standing perfectly erect and everything's aligned and there's no imbalances. Well, what body that's ever walked through your studio door has that body? I mean, it might be 0.001% or something like that. There may be some, sorry, I got a scratch. There may be some very few people who are close to that. Most of us are somewhere else, because of what do they, when we come in, what do we have? We have our hereditary imbalances, we have our work imbalances, we have our emotional imbalances, we have our injury imbalances, and those combinations all come in, and each one of them is different. There is no, that's why it's average, not, what's normal. There is no normal, but there is an average, right? So that's what we're looking at, and the averages. And I talk about it as a 70% rule. On either end of that bell curve, that, 10 or 15% on either end is where you have to do a lot of modifications. Whereas if you're not, that 70%, most of the people walk through the door, a large majority of them, unless you're working with dancers or really old people or things like, very old people, people have bad injuries and things. But for the average, person that walks through the door, that system fits that. The spring setting and the apparatus in relationship to how the body first learned how to move, and he puts that back into the system. And he does it with resistance, right? So there is resistance, and we do everything as well because there's open and closed chain. Which, closed chain is when you push onto the floor and the floor pushes back, and when you it's Newtonian physics, right? You push and it gives you a response. Well, that helps the bone and everything else. So there's a lot of talk about, well, we need that resistance training and strength training like that as we get older for the muscles and the bones. Because as we get older, I got something in my eye. As we get older, most people tend to do what? They tend to lose muscle mass. They tend to lose muscle. But a large part of that is because they tend not to move as much in gravity and in life. So they don't do as many things, right? Or they look at, well, I don't know about today, because kids today, and I'm sure they said this 100 years ago, they don't do the same thing I did when I grew up. But when I was a kid, we were out in the streets all the time, not the streets, but, the neighborhood, hanging out and running around and doing we were outside all the time. Now kids tend to spend their time inside on their computers and, on their phones and, whatnot, whatever apparatus the electronic apparatus that they're using. So, but we tend to build up a certain much, and then as we get older, we tend to do less and less, and so we lose. You don't use it, you lose it, right? That's just how it is. What does Pilates do? So Pilates, the reformer, right? It's got 4 springs. Now, you could have one with 8 or 10 or whatever, I don't know, but Joe's reformer had 4 springs. The clawfoot that were in his studio for, I don't know, over 3 decades, and then he had the metal ones made, in 1960 or 61, somewhere around there. So he still had those for at least 6 or 7 years, to use. They all had 4 springs. I have one of the original clawfoot, 4 springs. There's 4 places for the springs to attach. So something to think about. So when you have those 4 springs, each spring is about 25 pounds, right? There's a give or take. When you look at any of the polls that they do, there's a plus or minus. It's like it says it's 40%, but it could be 1 or 2% above or 1 or 2% below. There's that average variance. And that happens in everything, and it also happens in manufacturing. And so when I had Joe's original springs reproduced, I, took them as I showed them how far they had to go, what they had to do on the reformer, and they reproduced them. And they told me that excursion is about 25 pounds for that spring that I had, that I gave them. So you're talking 100 pounds. So is it your full body weight? No, it's not. It's not your full body weight. And that was part of Joe's philosophy and understanding of the apparatus and the work, is that the universal reformer, right? It would reform you, it would change you, and you didn't have to work as hard when you lie down. It wasn't as stressful, it wasn't as straining on the heart and the body systems and everything else, but it still gave you what you needed for strength and control, right? It's contrology, the study of control. So, and it gave you that, and the combination between stability and mobility that's always fluctuating in relationship to gravity, while we move through it to do different things in life. And his system facilitates that and really supports that. So I think, that's important. And, one of the things that Ramana always used to say is like, well, even that other stuff, and she was talking about weight training and other exercises and things like that, it's not as good as Pilates. So she would talk about, and she would talk that, it's not as good because it doesn't train you for life. Okay, it doesn't train you for the things that you need to do. And it's really true, because if you look at, and I always like to say this in my training, what is exercise apparatus made for today? And I wait, and I get lots of answers, but very few of them are, well, they're really made to make money, right? That, because when you go, right, you go into the gym, and how many different apparatus are there, right? Are those machines, plate machines? And how much does one of those cost, right? About as much as the universal reformer. The difference is, on Joe's reformer, you have enough exercises for the whole body. And there's even exercises for the dancers and the acrobats, and, for the full bell curve, right? So for everybody. But again, what's the standard? You go to one of those machines, and it allows you to do what? Either strengthen one muscle or one muscle group. And the body doesn't, then the brain doesn't organize for movement in gravity for function using one muscle or one muscle group. It doesn't do it. It's just not reality. So there is a big difference there. And so, yes, if you want eye candy, if you want to bump it up and bulk it up and do all that stuff that the weightlifters do, then yeah, you can do that. And yes, can you get a lot stronger and lift 300 pounds? Well, if you progress yourself over time, sure you can. You can train a monkey to do just about anything, right? And we're not far off from the monkeys. So basically, what happens is that we can train to do those things, and the body will respond. But it doesn't. Where in life, in gravity, usually for most people, right? Most people, what do you have to lift? What do you have to push? What do you have to pull? How much? How often is it more than 100 pounds? Right? It's usually not. Now, there may be some jobs, right? So if you're in football, if you're have a job where you're delivering like a refrigerator or a freezer, well then yeah, you might want to work at the gym and strengthen some of those muscles for sure, because that's going to require more, but that's not what most people do. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't weightlift. I'm not saying you shouldn't strengthen that way at all. There are certain times that is important. And if you want that eye candy, there's only one way to get it, and that's doing that. So again, it depends on what you want. But when I see these conversations and these questions and people talking about, well, Pilates doesn't do it, and you have to weight train to do this. Well, weight training is resistance training, and Pilates is resistance training. So, and it's enough resistance for what we need to do in life, and it's closed and it's open and it's everything in between. So I think that when you're really going to talk about that process and that understanding, that's something that we have to look at and really see. Now hold on, let me go back and let me see that question again. So do we need strength training as we age, and are there specific strength training that Pilates on apparatus simply cannot provide us? Well, the thing that it can't provide is more than 100 pounds, right? Okay, so if that's something that you are required to do in your job or your activity, then yeah, you need to do more. But for most things in life, the universal reformer gives you enough resistance, and it's variable, right? Because 4 springs is 100, 3 springs is 75, 2 springs, and then and again, remember, sometimes in Pilates less is more, right? So when you switch it from the shoulders and the arms, or the hips and the legs, and you get into the powerhouses, right? The less springs you have, and you stabilize the arms, and then the powerhouses have to work. When you have less springs, it has to work more in relationship to gravity. So it builds strength with less resistance. And none of those other machines that I know of do that. Now, there may be, maybe somebody will come up with something. Maybe there's something out there I haven't seen. I mean, I don't go out and research and look at every apparatus that's ever invented. Who's got time for that? So, but what I've seen and what I've studied over, 40 years as a physical therapist and, and a Pilates teacher and all the other things that I've done, I have not seen that happen. So if you got it out there, somebody knows something, send it to me and let's have a little discussion. I'd be happy to do it, and then we can talk about it. But when we look at that process, the work that we do on a universal reformer compared to the work that you would do on a gym apparatus that is resistance training are much different, and they're both can be trained to be functional to a certain degree. Pilates much more so, because the problem with the gym ones, if you do the whole circuit, you do everything, then you tend to work all those muscles. But what are you not working, right? Pilates works everything all at the same time, or at least it should be. When you look at Joe and the way he worked and the way he trains, it should be everything. When you go to the gym and you get on that one apparatus, what's working? Pretty much just that muscle or that muscle group, and the rest of the body is it doesn't tell you to do that, doesn't tell you to do any of that. It tells you to focus on that one muscle. And matter of fact, it's like I always, many of you may not know what Cybex is, but back in the 80s, Cybex was this apparatus that gave you 100% of resistance through the full range of motion of the limb. And because when we look at strengthening, right, that what was the Nautilus machine? It was always trying to find a way to build strength, full strength through the full range of the joint. Okay. Well, the Nautilus, the Cybex sort of allowed you to do that, but if there's any YouTube videos of it out there, you should really watch, because they have people try to do 100%, and when they do that, they are doing all this other stuff with their body at such extremes that if you saw somebody doing that type of movement walking down the street, you'd think they'd have a neurological disease. So it wasn't normal, right? Where when you do the universal reformer and you do the exercise and it gives you the resistance, that's still difficult, but everything else is working. It's working in the balance between that stability and that mobility, right? Function. And every exercise, right, to move, you need what? You need stability and mobility. You can't do one without the other. So, and Joe understood that. So that's part of his system. So that's the difference, is that you don't see that. And those apparatus don't do that for you. So that's why Pilates, again, as a physical therapist, I've been doing this for 40-some years. Well, not 40 years yet as a PT, but almost, since PT school, I got into PT school in 84, so it's been 40 years since I got into PT school and started studying these things and was trying to understand it, because as a dancer, as a mover, a lot of that stuff didn't make any sense to me. into my body for movement. And when I got off that universal reformer the first time, I got off and I'm like, why isn't this everywhere? This is amazing. This is what everybody should do. And I said, if I ever get a chance, I'm going to do something with it. And I did get a chance. I bought the business. I did have the trademark. I did lose it. And now that I've lost it, look what's happened to Pilates. It's anything and everything goes for Pilates. But anyways, that being said, I thought it should be everywhere. And his name's everywhere, his work isn't. And I'm still trying to make sure that his work is going to be everywhere, because it's so important, because it does what it does. So when I see these things and people try to say you need more, depends on the situation. If you're 80 years old, you don't need to lift 300 pounds. You don't need to lift 200 pounds. You probably don't even need to lift 100 pounds, maybe 100. Okay, and with Pilates, you have that, but you have it lying down. So, when you're doing it, lifting 100 pounds against gravity, it's harder to do when you're lying down and working 100 with the apparatus. Plus, one last thing. Let me just. One last thing. What was I going to say? I took my sip and I looked at your question there and I lost it. So with whom? Where did you first try Pilates? Well, I studied with Romana, and I studied with Steve Giorgiano at SUNY Purchase, and that was back in the 80s and the 90s. And that was one of the when I first, and there's a reason why I started working with Romana, because when I bought the business, she's the person that ran the studio for 20 years or more, right? She ran the Pilates studio, and then when Thai closed and he spread it out, she went to different places, and then Steve and I started working with her, and she was again, she had the most experience at the studio and was trained to carry on the work. Not while Joe was alive per se, but more afterwards, because she didn't start working at the studio until 1970, and he'd been dead for a couple of years. She had been a student, and he used her as a model, so she had it in her body. I mean, it was always amazing. We do, I in the beginning, she would do the teacher trainings, and I was always in the room. Sometimes we had PT and Pilates. My PT practice always had Pilates in it, and I had Steve there in the beginning. And then later I had other teachers, Bob Likens and others, Brett Howard, different, people that right? They all started working with me. Well, Bob didn't, but Brett did. And she would do the training, and she would always be, talking, and I was observing. So, I spent a lot of time, and filming. We filmed in the beginning. That's what the Romana tapes that I have are. So there was a lot of that, and she was very much, she knew the system, and she had it in her body. She was almost 70, and she'd get up and, well, here, let me show you, and do this and do that, and be able to do a lot of it, right? So, and I had met some of the other elders, and, I met Corolla at one point, and, she'd already retired. She gave me a little mat, session in her apartment, because we talked about it, and she said, you want me to do it? I said, sure. But at the same time, it wasn't the same, so it wasn't that she was bad. She was a good teacher. It was a good session. But again, I didn't take lots, so I don't know. I didn't take any, apparatus sessions with her or anything like that. So, there's differences. So that's, with Romana, that's who I started with. And she's, to me, the person who knew the most and kept it as close to Joe. She changed things. We know that she did. Joe, when we look at the archives from when he started to when he ended, he did change some things. Some things. Very few. Romana changed very few. A lot of it was more for safety issues than anything else, because running that studio for 20 or 30 years, a few things happened, and when she saw things happening, she was cognizant and said, okay, we're going to change it to make it more safe. Alex, well, I'm glad you like it. I was lucky to work with her and spend the time. I mean, her and I spent 13 years working on the training program, developing the training program. It wasn't just her and I. I mean, we had training centers. I had a training center at, it's funny, I recently heard somebody say, When I owned the trademark, if you wanted to get certified, you'd have to go to New York and it'd be expensive and all this stuff. Well, they obviously don't know their history, and they're incorrect, because one of the first things I did when I bought the business and the trademarks was to start setting up training centers. So I went to LA, I went to Seattle, I went to Chicago, I went to Philadelphia, we were in New York, I went to Atlanta, I went to Fort Myers. So I was, and I did partnerships in Brazil, in Australia, so when I got off that apparatus and I said, why isn't this everywhere? It should be. And if I get if I ever get a chance, I'm going to do it. It wasn't about the money. It was about the system. It made me feel in a way that nothing else did. And I thought it should be everywhere. So I Ramon and I, we took it around the world first. Before she moved on, after I lost the trademark, she moved on with her daughter and her granddaughter with Ramana's Pilates. So, but up until that time, I was working with Paris. I was working to set it up in Paris, in the Netherlands. And we'd already done Australia and Brazil. So we were in the process of doing all those things. And when she moved on, they went with her and didn't go with me. That's business. Things happen. So, but at the same time, I and Ramana were responsible for pretty much taking it around the world before, and then when I lost the trademark, everybody jumped on the bandwagon, and manufacturers and everything else, and started to take it everywhere. So, and now we see there's, how many manufacturers? I get a Chinese notification almost every week asking me to look at the equipment and this and that, and then there's, every country has their own manufacturer now, because that's what people are doing. So it's growing, and it's growing, but they're also changing it quite a bit. And it's there's this whole excuse me. There's this whole contemporary classical thing, and it used to be New York, California, but now that it's worldwide, it's contemporary classical, because after the trademark. A lot of people started doing their own thing and inventing their own exercises or saying things, and they had to differentiate themselves. So they had to somehow try to make it better. So the science makes it better, this makes it better, that makes it better. But I haven't seen the science that says that what Joe did, first of all, is bad. Show me. Again, anybody has it? Let me see. I haven't seen it anywhere. Well, when you say Europe, question mark, well, that was, Marjorie Oren in Netherlands and Philippe in Paris, that I was working with them. I had contracts in the process, setting it up and all that stuff. So that was Europe. Anyways, so I'm getting way off tangent here, which is okay. I mean, tangents are good. Let's get back to the question at hand. Again, do we need it? Yes. Everybody needs resistance exercise. The science shows us that because as you get older, you start to lose muscle mass. So, and how do you build muscle mass? With resistance. You need resistance. But walking every day for 2 or 3 or 4 miles goes a long way to keep you in health and keep you in relationship to gravity strengthened and not lose as much, right? So it's just about getting out there and spending the time, right? Because to walk 3 miles, it's going to take you an hour. Most people, an hour or so. I guess if you fast walk, you jog, that's different. I'm not a big fan of running hard because it's tough on the joints long term. Again, the exercise, we all need exercise. Humans need to exercise to maintain, and if you don't, you go downhill, and things get worse and worse and worse over time. So we all need to exercise. The question is, what, right? And you start, if you don't exercise, and you haven't exercised, and you start to exercise, no matter what you do, you're going to start to feel different, and usually better, right? But the question becomes, can you do that exercise for a lifetime? And when we look at the heavy weight training and to get that size muscle, right? That much resistance to build that over time to get that size of muscle takes a lot more than 30 minutes to 40. Well, all right, let's say Pilates workout, right? Our 50-minute session 3 times a week. To get that, you're not going to look like these guys that pump up. It takes a lot more time and energy and effort and all that. And so, is that something that you can maintain for a lifetime? And there's always going to be a bell curve. There's always going to be some that can, but the majority, it's too much. But with Pilates, again, what does it do? The universal reformer gives you the resistance in the relationship that you need in gravity for function, in a concise, precise, relatively precise, because perfection is not a reality. Just like balance is not a reality, right? So we gotta find our way, and when we do that, you see that this system provides you what you need for life. And you can do it a couple hours a week, and it gives you enough to maintain that. And that's what's important. Are you going to, can we do it for a lifetime? Plus, I got off that apparatus, and I felt amazing. I felt good. When I did the Nautilus, and I did the Cybex, and I did the free weights with lots of, like a lot of resistance, the way you're supposed to do to really build strength, none of that ever really felt that good to me. And that's why when I got on the apparatus, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, because it was, and it is. And, you're all here because you're doing it, right? Or some variation. Ramon always said, that other stuff's not really that good, but if it's based on Pilates, it's still better than that other stuff. So, she's basically saying, so the contemporary, it's based on it, still better than a lot of the other stuff that's out there. So it's not, and again, I'm not saying that the contemporary stuff's bad at all. I'm saying there's so many variables that I can't make that assumption because I don't do the work. I focus on Joe's work. I do his work. I teach his work. When we do it Joe's way, it's you see that's a specific thing. And that's what I, teach. That's what I'm trying to do. And it's Joe's contrology. That's the important thing to understand. And when you do Joe's contrology the way he taught it, and on the apparatus is the way he set it up, it really does what? It gives you what he, pretty much close to what he said it was going to do for you. All right? I've seen it do that. Whereas the other stuff, I don't know. So if you're training, and again, I'm sorry, but if your training is doing other things and you're not getting the same results that you see that, you read that Joe said you were supposed to get, and you don't get those, well, you might want to look at what your the training you got, because it may be different. And if it's different exercise and different apparatus, it's not going to be the same, because the body responds to stress a certain way, right? And when you put the body on that reformer, it becomes a closed system. And when that system's closed, whatever you do on it, the way you do it, your body's going to modify and adapt to that stress. Okay, so if you change the exercise and you change the apparatus, that stress is different. Your body's going to react different, and maybe it's better. I don't know. And if it is, great. And remember, even if it's not as good, it's still better than a lot of the other things. And at the same time, everybody needs to exercise. So let's put it out there and teach people. Okay, and if you're, if over time you get interested, that's why I call it the Pilates source. As a PT and as a person, I always try to go to the foundation of the information. In PT, just like in Pilates, there's a lot of derivatives, right? And I would always try to find my way to where it first started, to the source, because that's, if the derivative's doing it, there's a reason. So I prefer the source, and that's why I call what I do the Pilates source, because I bought the business, I bought his property, the archives, all the things that I have. I'm trying to maintain the quality, integrity of his work for generations to come, and that's what I've been doing for the past, since 1992 when I bought the business, and even before that, really, since I got off the apparatus, because I thought it was important. Anyways, so that's the answer to that question, okay, which is basically, yes, it's important. We need it. We need resistance. We need, it's not weight training, right? Because it's not weights. And it's interesting. One last thing. one last tangent. Okay, so when you look at exercise, when they study muscle, quite often they talk about the spring property of muscle. Okay, in the 90s, I went to a couple PT research conferences on muscles, basically, up in New Hampshire. And it was through their research section, and it was a whole weekend, and they had all these different clinics and labs that were doing research on muscle function. And those professors or those academics come in and present so that we could see it. Almost all of it had some variation in relationship to the spring property of muscle. And I always thought it was interesting because when you look at Cyberlex and Nautilus and all these other exercise free weights, trying to strengthen the muscle, and they were trying to imitate the full function of the muscle, the strength through the full range and all that stuff, which is not really how the brain organizes itself to do things. They weren't using springs, but Joe was, and so the spring is the property of the muscle, right? Spring property of muscle. Well, if you want to strengthen the muscle, why don't you use something it's got the same property of? Makes the most sense to me. So that's something else to think about. So if you want to look at the science, look at that aspect of it, and start to realize that the spring has certain properties. Now, in Pilates we have different types of springs, really two main types, and they do different things, but that's a whole nother AMAP. All right, so if anybody has a question, you can ask it now. If you have another, these are the kind of questions that I ask. Somebody sent me that question, so if you have a question, every Friday 1 o'clock I'll be here answering a question. You can send it to me, I'll add it to the list. So if you have anything about what I just talked about and you want to ask here right now, I can try to answer it for you. So that's and again, if you know other Pilates teachers who you think would like this, you let them know what I'm doing and what it's about. And they can also, when I'm done, I will be uploading this to the Pilates Source YouTube channel. So you'll be able to get this, you'll be able to rewatch this at the Pilates Source YouTube channel. And I usually do it within a day or two. So either today or tomorrow I'll get to it, and I'll upload it to the YouTube channel. And if you if you like this, like that, and subscribe, and you'll be able to if you can't make the time all the time, you'll be able to watch it every week. Okay, so thanks for joining. I don't see any questions, so I am going to say goodbye, and I will see you all next week. Oh, one last thing, I do have 2 classes I teach. One is Pilates, one is not. On Tuesdays, well, no, there's 3 classes. On Mondays, Cynthia, you're welcome. Every Monday, Elaine, Ewan, and I, we teach a archival mat class. Rachel, thanks for joining. And Angela, you too. Thanks, guys. I teach an archival, return to life mat class at 5 o'clock on New York time on Mondays. Elaine, Ewan, and I switch every week. And then after that, right now we're in the middle of doing the 2x4 class, which comes right after that, and we relate it to the mat as well. So that's Mondays. And then on Tuesdays at 12:30, I teach my class, which is Balanceology. And it's if you're having any issues with balance, again, it's the last thing we gain, first thing we lose. So it's something that I try, and it's important. And we get a lot of that in Pilates, but you can add a little bit more, and that's what this class is. It's a half hour. And then I do the resistor class, which is the arm and leg springs. Joe's an arm and leg springs from the resistor. You don't need a resistor to do it. You can do it on a Cadillac, a wall unit, anything that you can attach 2 springs to that you can, and ideally adjust a little bit, but even if you can't, we can make it work. Okay, so that's on Tuesdays. And that's all in my Linktree at Linktree/Sean_Gallagher. So if you're interested, you can sign up there. Okay? All right, everybody. Thanks for joining, and I will see you sometime soon. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.